Greg and I met at a stage combat club actually in college. So about the first time I met him, I was actually swinging a sword at his head. It's like we do choreographed fights for plays and movies and things like that. My first impression of Greg was that he was a very nice young man and thought someone that I'd want to be friends with.
I looked at her and I went, wow, that's a beautiful girl. Oh man, I don't have a chance.
Well, our first date was kind of interesting, more so in that it almost didn't happen a couple times instead of like the actual date.
What happened, it was that it took so long for it to happen.
He decided to ask me out right at the end of the school year, and we're from opposite sides of the state. So he asked me out, and I said yes, and said, but I don't know when we're going to be able to go out on the date.
The entire summer went by, and we never actually had our date.
And that was kind of the end of it, and figuring that when we got back to school, that we'd go out.
And I was afraid that she just had said yes to sort of be nice and didn't want to hurt my feelings as a friend, because we'd known each other for about a year and a half beforehand.
We'd see each other a couple times over the summer because our club was still going, so we'd go to practice for it. And we didn't really talk about it, and apparently he had thought that I was just saying yes to be polite and didn't actually want to go out with him.
And I was sort of freaking out. I'm like, oh man, she doesn't really want to go out with me. She just said this to be polite.
And one of our friends cornered me in the hall
and grabbed her and was like, Greg is freaking out, go talk to him.
So I talked to him and things got settled down. Then we got back to school in the fall and we'd set a date for our first date. And he then went and volunteered to go help our club at the Renaissance Festival on school day. They have a special day for school kids to come in and enjoy the fair just by themselves. And it turned out to be the same day we'd scheduled for our date. So it almost didn't happen a second time. But we did end up going out.
Neither of us can really remember exactly even where it was. It was just a nice dinner at a Chinese restaurant somewhere in Ann Arbor.
Our first kiss, well, he tried before I was ready to give me a kiss, actually.
It's sort of like I tried and she didn't notice and it didn't work out all that great.
His reaction was kind of cute when I said, no, not yet. And then when we did actually have our first kiss, it was very sweet and quickly followed by
a second and a third and many consecutive kisses for about 10 minutes.
There's not really somewhere we consider like our special place.
There are types of places that the two of us like to go together, like spending a lot of time outside.
We like to go to parks a lot.
Places where we can see plants and wildlife. Anywhere outdoors, which is a lot easier in Seattle.
But we don't have somewhere that's really our special place.
For me, anywhere close to her is a great location to be.
We don't actually have an our song. Closest we have is we kind of have an our band.
It's just Carbon Leaf, just because it happened to be on the CD player.
When we kissed for the first time.
The most memorable day we've spent together. It's actually kind of tough for me because I have to say each day I spend with her gets better and better.
It's probably going to be the day that Greg proposed to me.
Today is more memorable than yesterday was. Tomorrow will probably be more memorable than today. There's a lot of ways that I think the two of us match really well and are very similar. A lot of our interests are very similar, a lot of our hobbies we're both certified geeks and nerds and would admit that.
We both are geeks, no question about that.
In a heartbeat.
We've got a lot of the same interests, like things we like to do for fun. We both enjoy video games and computer games and sword fighting.
We find ourselves finishing each other's sentences a lot, and not because we know the other person so well, but because it's what we would say. And we end up having very interesting conversations. As for the differences between us, I think it's hard for me to think of them really as differences because the parts of my personality that are a little flawed and scattered, I'd say she's very organized about, and vice versa.
He's a lot taller than I am.
So really, I think the differences we have complement each other very well. Liz and I have a lot of hobbies and interests that are similar. I mean, that's how we met. We met at Ring of Steel doing the sword fighting and stunt troupe and flying off of buildings and blowing each other up and trying to stab each other with sharp, pointy things.
We like to do a lot of outdoors kind of stuff.
And love of nature is another thing that's pretty important to both of us.
We both like the video games and computer games.
Which is something that keeps us together and happens with friends.
He's just gotten me interested in his wargaming.
Lets us talk in a weird sort of code language that only other nerds would ever understand.
Of course, we also like to do the sword fighting and like the acting.
There's a great deal I admire about Liz. She's such a strong, independent woman who is fully capable of being like, okay, I'm taking charge, this is how we're going to do it, but also at times she's willing to listen. She's very, very sensitive about how other people feel.
He's such a kind, caring person, and I love his personality.
There's really nothing about her I don't admire. I admire her faith, her strength and conviction of what she believes and how she feels about things, and the fact that she stays with that.
Can't say there was really a specific time where we knew that we were meant for each other. It just kind of happened over the course of going out and hanging out with each other.
There wasn't really ever a moment where that I thought, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with and my end of days with. It was sort of a much more gradual process than that.
Just at some point we realized that we'd stop talking about the future as if we get married, and we're saying when we get married.
And somewhere along the line in this sort of slow process, it became, so when we get married, we'll do whatever. I'm not exactly sure when that transition came, but I know it was in there. Our proposal is sort of a fun story. It's a little bit of it's almost a romantic comedy in and of itself, just situationally.
I had moved out to Seattle for work, and I was back in Michigan for Christmas and New Year's.
And her parents had invited us out to dinner, and we'd all had dinner as a family.
For the weekend, we were planning that I would go back to Ann Arbor with Greg, because he was still living in Ann Arbor at the time.
With a group of housemates, and it was a few days before New Year's Eve.
And I was going to spend the night, and then the next day we were going to go find some new glasses for him.
And we got back, and that night I got incredibly, incredibly sick.
We weren't sure what it was at the time, thinking maybe food poisoning, but it turned out it was actually really nasty flu.
Sickest I've been in a long time, and Liz just spent the next 36 hours or so taking care of me until I actually started feeling a lot better.
He started to get better, and I came down with it.
And I spent the next couple days trying to take care of her.
Never did go get the glasses, but we, took care of each other and got better. And on New Year's Day, we went and had dinner with his family. On the way home, we were just talking in the car on the ride.
And I remember thinking, man, it's easy to be in a relationship and to look at the other person when you guys are doing great and be like, wow, this person's amazing, they're so attractive, you see all the good qualities. And we just saw each other at pretty much our worst. And all it did was make us love each other more. And I knew I wasn't going to see her again for a few months. I sort of had this grandiose plan of how I was going to ask her to marry me in a very nice way, and it really, I tripped over my words.
He started babbling, for about a minute, just stream of words, no complete sentences.
And I did it in the car when I wasn't planning at all to say it, and stopped for a moment and just went, okay, that's it, I'll just throw it out there. and looked at her and said, "So will you marry me?"
Was a little surprised, wasn't quite expecting it to come then, but I starting to get a little idea that maybe that was what was coming when he started babbling.
When I first proposed to her, she was just sort of silent for a moment. I remember kind of being silent for a moment, somewhere in the back of my head going, did I just actually say that? Yeah, I said that. That wasn't at all like I planned, but hey, there it was.
My immediate reaction was yes.
Yes, of course, and smiled and held my hand, and I almost drove off the road.
And that was how he proposed.
I remember the reaction of my parents. I don't know why I didn't tell them immediately that night. I ended up waiting for a few days, I think, just to convince me it was true. They congratulated me and said we love you and were very supportive.
My parents were a little surprised, I think, when they heard about it. They weren't quite expecting it to have come when it did, but they were very happy for us. We're planning to go to Hawaii for our honeymoon.
We haven't decided exactly where in Hawaii we're going yet. I'd like to go to Kauai. I know that, I believe it's the Big Island that Liz would like to go to as well, which when she was young she went. I've never been. But she went with her family and they biked down a volcano, and she keeps telling me stories, so I think it should be a lot of fun. It'll be very nice.